The bioluminescent arrow hummed as it curved impossibly through the air, bypassing shields and obstacles before finding its mark with perfect precision. The corporate executive slumped forward, dead before he realized he'd been targeted. Thalassa Vex retracted her specialized bow into its compact form, the weapon folding seamlessly into an ornate bracer on her forearm. Her silver eyes, the distinctive trait of the Aelorian species, narrowed with satisfaction. Another contract fulfilled with the signature efficiency that had earned her the name the Void's Arrow across 17 star systems. Confirmation of elimination received, chirped the neural interface embedded behind her pointed ear. Payment transferred. New contract incoming. Thalassa strode from her vantage point, her movements liquid and predatory, tall and lithe, with skin that shimmered with faint blue bioluminescence and white hair that seemed to absorb surrounding light. She was an apex predator who had never known failure. The 7 kill marks tattooed along her neck pulsed gently, one for each of her most challenging targets. Display contract, she commanded as her stealth ship's ramp descended. The holographic display materialized before her eyes. Commander Everett Kane, Earth Military Special Operations. A detailed dossier appeared. Combat records, tactical achievements, psychological profile. The bounty was substantial, nearly triple her usual fee. Interesting, she murmured, studying the human's features. Unlike her previous targets, corrupt executives, crime lords, and rival assassins, this one was a decorated soldier with a reputation for strategic brilliance rather than brute force. Humans generally relied on technology to compensate for their physical limitations, but this Kane had reportedly defeated 3 Carnaxian berserkers with nothing but improvised weapons and environmental tactics. "What makes you so valuable, Commander Kane?" she whispered, tracing the outline of his face. "Or so dangerous?" The contract details explained that Kane had been disrupting syndicate operations across the Orion Arm, becoming a significant obstacle to their expansion into Earth-controlled territories. His elimination would open strategic shipping lanes and remove a key intelligence asset from the human military. Thalassa initiated the ship's launch sequence, setting course for the Vega outpost where Kane had last been reported. As stars streaked past her viewport, she prepared her arsenal, selecting specialized arrows designed to penetrate military-grade armor. 3 standard days later, she tracked Kane to an abandoned mining colony on Vega 9's smallest moon. The place was a labyrinth of derelict processing facilities and collapsed tunnels, ideal hunting ground for someone like her who could see in near-total darkness. Bioscan detecting single human life form, approximately 300 meters northwest, her neural interface reported. Too easy, she thought. She'd expected more of a challenge from this supposedly legendary tactician. Thalassa moved silently through the ruins, her adaptive camouflage garments blending perfectly with her surroundings. She nocked a tracking arrow, designed to follow a target's heat signature regardless of obstacles. She found him in what appeared to be an old control room, his back to her as he worked on a damaged console. One shot, and her largest contract ever would be complete. The arrow flew true, curving slightly to compensate for the subtle air currents, then shattered against an invisible barrier that flared blue upon impact. "I've been waiting for you, Void's Arrow," said Kane without turning around. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "I was beginning to think my invitation wasn't enticing enough." Thalassa froze, then quickly darted behind a column as Kane finally turned to face her general direction. He was taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders and eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness where she hid. "Invitation," she called out, already knocking another arrow. Kane smiled, and something about it sent an unfamiliar sensation down her spine. "The bounty on my head. I arranged it myself. How else could I meet the legendary huntress who never misses? I have a proposition for you." For the first time in her hunting career, Thalassa felt the unfamiliar sensation of being prey rather than predator. Her 8th kill mark would not come as easily as the others. And strangely, The thought excited her more than she cared to admit. The jungle planet Nerissa 6 was a symphony of deadly beauty. Carnivorous plants that sang to lure prey, bioluminescent fungi that released hallucinogenic spores, and rainfall acidic enough to scar even Thalassa's resilient skin. It was the third world she had tracked Kane to in as many weeks. "You're becoming an expensive hobby, Commander," Thalassa muttered as she followed his trail through the dense undergrowth. Their first encounter had ended in a tactical withdrawal. Hers, not his. Kane's proposition had been a complex offer involving shared intelligence on the syndicate that had allegedly hired her. She dismissed it as a desperate ploy and attacked, only to find herself outmaneuvered in the very terrain she'd chosen for the ambush. The memory still burned. He'd anticipated her movements, somehow predicting the impossible arc of her specialized arrows and setting up countermeasures at key positions. When she closed for hand-to-hand combat, confident in her species' superior strength and reflexes, he'd used the environment against her, collapsing a passageway to separate them, just as she'd gained the upper hand. A distant rustle pulled her from her thoughts. Kane was near. Thalassa activated her molecular sight, an Aelorian ability that allowed her to briefly see through solid objects within a limited range. There, moving steadily through a dense thicket about 70 meters ahead, she knocked an arrow designed to pierce the thickest jungle foliage. The shot was perfect, slicing through vegetation with minimal disturbance. But instead of the satisfying thud of impact, she heard a metallic clang followed by a familiar voice. Still predictable, Huntress. Kane emerged from behind a massive trunk, holding her intercepted arrow. He had somehow calculated its trajectory and caught it with a reinforced gauntlet. "Impressive tech," he said, examining the arrow. "The micro-thrusters that adjust mid-flight are particularly ingenious." Thalassa was already moving, circling to flank him. "I don't need compliments from dead men." "Then perhaps information instead," Kane offered, seemingly unconcerned as she disappeared into the foliage. "Your employer has placed identical bounties on both of us. We're being played against each other." The revelation gave her pause, but not enough to lower her guard. She launched herself from an overhanging branch, twin daggers drawn. Kane reacted with startling speed for a human, but not fast enough. One of her blades sliced across his shoulder before he could fully evade. "First blood," she smiled. The satisfaction was short-lived. As she landed and pivoted for another strike, searing pain tore through her side. Looking down, she saw one of her own arrows, the one he'd caught, protruding from just below her ribs. "Modified it slightly," Kane explained, breathing heavily as he maintained distance. "Remove the micro-thrusters. Sometimes simpler is better." Thalassa staggered back, silver blood seeping between her fingers as she pressed against the wound. In her centuries of hunting, no one had ever wounded her. The shock was almost as debilitating as the pain. "You should seek medical attention," Kane said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "That's not a fatal wound if treated promptly, but Nerissa's atmosphere accelerates infection in off-worlders." "Why not finish it?" she demanded, backing toward the shelter of a massive root structure. Kane shrugged his injured shoulder with a grimace. "Because I meant what I said. We're being manipulated, and I'd rather have the galaxy's deadliest archer as an ally than an enemy." Darkness crept at the edges of Thalassa's vision, as her accelerated metabolism tried to combat the blood loss. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was Kane approaching, concern rather than triumph in his eyes. She awoke in a hidden cave, her wound expertly dressed with local medicinal flora and synthetic sealant. Kane sat across a small thermal unit, tending his own injury. "Why?" she asked simply. Kane looked up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "My father taught me to respect exceptional skill, even in an opponent." A pause. "Especially in an opponent." Something unfamiliar flickered in Thalassa's chest, something dangerous and warm. For the first time in her hunting career, she studied her prey not just as a target, but as an equal. "Your form is impressive, but you telegraph your left strikes," Kane said, circling Thalassa in the abandoned temple they'd claimed as a temporary base. An opponent who studied, you would expect the right feint followed by the left cross. Thalassa scowled, wiping sweat from her brow. No one studies me. They die too quickly. Kane's laugh echoed off the ancient stone walls. Well, I'm still breathing, so perhaps your reputation is slightly exaggerated. Their unlikely alliance was 3 standard weeks old. After confirming Kane's claims about Governor Drazen's duplicity, hiring both of them to eliminate the other, they'd agreed to work together long enough to uncover the politician's true motives. The evidence they gathered suggested something far beyond simple elimination of threats. Drazen was orchestrating a complex power play involving syndicate territories, military installations, and unprecedented access to illegal weapons technology. Again, Thalassa demanded, settling into her fighting stance. Their daily sparring sessions had begun as a way to recover from their respective wounds, but had evolved into something more, an intimate dance of knowledge exchange. She taught him the precision of Aelorian hunting techniques. He showed her the adaptability of human combat strategies. Kane lunged, faster than she expected, his hand stopping just short of her throat. "You're distracted today," he observed, stepping back. She was. The proximity of his body during their combat training had awakened sensations long dormant. Aelorians were not celibate, but physical intimacy was rare, usually clinical in nature. The heat that flooded her whenever Kane's skin brushed hers was anything but clinical. "We'll infiltrate Drazen's compound tomorrow," she said, deliberately changing the subject. "The security patterns suggest a vulnerability during the atmospheric purge cycle." Kane nodded, but his eyes held hers a moment too long. One last night to prepare, then. The tension between them built through the evening as they finalized their plans. When Kane's hand brushed hers while passing a datapad, neither pulled away immediately. "Your species," he said quietly. "Do you form attachments?" Thalassa considered deflecting but found herself answering honestly. "Rarely. We live too long. Most relationships end in watching partners age and die." And intimacy. The directness was typically human, typically Kane. "Physical coupling occurs," she replied, her voice betraying more emotion than intended. "But without attachment, it's incomplete." Kane moved closer, his hand tentatively reaching to touch the luminescent patterns along her forearm. "And with attachment." The sensation of his fingers tracing her bioluminescent markings sent pulses of light cascading across her skin, a physiological response she couldn't control and couldn't hide. "I wouldn't know," she whispered. Their first kiss was hesitant, an exploration of alien territory. Their second was not. What followed was a revelation. The strength she'd always restrained unleashed with a partner who could match her intensity, the precision she brought to hunting channeled into discovering what made him gasp her name in the darkness. Afterward, lying amid tangled bedding, she studied his sleeping form with new eyes. Humans were fragile, short-lived creatures. But in that moment, with the memory of his hands mapping constellations across her body, fragility seemed like a different kind of strength. For the first time in centuries, Thalassavex, the Void's arrow, felt fear, not of death or failure, but of loss. The governor's compound loomed like a monolith against Aurelia Prime's perpetual sunset. Curved architecture of glass and carbon steel housed the administrative heart of 3 star systems, and the evidence that would expose Drazen's conspiracy. The security mainframe is located in the northeast quadrant. Kane's voice came through Thalassa's neural interface as she scaled the exterior with specialized climbing gear. "Once you're in, you'll have approximately 6 minutes before the automated sweeps detect the intrusion." "I need 3, she replied, her confidence genuine. While Kane created a diversion at the main security checkpoint, she would access Drazen's private servers and extract proof of his manipulations. The plan was proceeding flawlessly until she reached the server room and found Governor Drazen himself waiting, flanked by syndicate enforcers. "The legendary Void's arrow," Drazen said, his augmented eyes glowing faintly in the dim room. "I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your contract." Thalassa kept her expression neutral despite her racing thoughts. How had he known? I assume Commander Kane is nearby. Drazen continued. You two have become quite inseparable, according to my surveillance. How disappointing. I expected better from someone with your reputation. What is this really about, Drazen? She demanded, calculating escape routes while keeping her hands visible. The governor smiled thinly. Evolution, my dear. The syndicates are the past. Military contracts are the future. Kane's elimination opens doors to Earth's defense networks. Your elimination removes the last person who could connect it all to me. He gestured, and a holographic display activated, showing Kane fighting his way through security forces, unaware he was being herded into a trap. Your choice is simple, Drazen said. Complete your original contract and kill Kane, and I double your fee. Refuse, and neither of you leaves this planet alive. The rational, hunter part of her mind calculated coldly, 1 death instead of 2, a clean resolution to a messy entanglement, and the restoration of her perfect record. Open a direct channel to Kane, she said. When his voice came through, strained from exertion, something twisted painfully in her chest. Thalassa, what's happening? Change of plans, she said flatly. Drazen was waiting. He knows everything. Get out, Kane urged. We'll regroup at the backup location. She closed her eyes briefly. There won't be a regroup, Kane. Silence, then understanding. Thalassa, don't. The contract was always going to be fulfilled. She cut him off. You were a worthy opponent. More than that. But this ends now. She cut the communication, meeting Drazen's satisfied gaze. Wise choice, the governor said. My men will guide you to an optimal position. Make it clean. 20 minutes later, positioned on an elevated walkway, Thalassa watched through her targeting system as Kane was driven into the killing zone, a courtyard with limited cover and no exits. She knocked an arrow, the familiar motion now heavy with unfamiliar emotion. I'm sorry, she whispered, and fired. The arrow curved beautifully, exactly as designed, and struck the ground 3 centimeters from Kane's foot. The specialized arrowhead discharged its payload, not poison, but a micro-EMP that temporarily disabled the governor's surveillance. Kane's eyes found hers across the distance, shock giving way to grim understanding. He grabbed the arrow and disappeared into the smoke of his own detonation charges. When Drazen's furious voice demanded an explanation for her miss, Thalassa was already moving, abandoning her position and the certainty of her old life in a single irreversible decision. But by the time she reached the rendezvous point, Kane was gone, leaving only a blood-stained piece of fabric and a message carved into the wall. Some betrayals can't be undone. The Bloodstone Plateau stretched across the horizon, its crimson cliffs catching the light of twin setting suns. Thalassa stood at its edge, the wind whipping her white hair like a banner. She had chosen this place for their final confrontation. Open ground, nowhere to hide, a hunter exposing herself as prey. 3 months had passed since her betrayal at Drazen's compound. 3 months of hunting a different quarry, evidence that could bring down the governor. 3 months of searching for Kane, following rumors and whispers, always one step behind. Now finally, he had responded to her signal. He would come. Whether for reconciliation or vengeance remained to be seen. Her enhanced hearing caught the sound of approaching footsteps. Unhurried, deliberate, she didn't turn. If you're going to kill me, she said, at least allow me to see the arrow coming. That would be more consideration than you showed me, Kane replied, his voice closer than expected. Thalassa turned slowly. He looked thinner, harder, a new scar bisecting his left eyebrow. In his hand was a bow, not one of human design, but fashioned after her own. Around his wrist gleamed a modified version of her arrow guidance system. You've been busy, she observed. Reverse engineering has always been a specialty of mine, he said without humor. I learned from the best. The distance between them, 20 meters of wind-swept stone, felt both vast and microscopic. What I did at the compound, she began, was exactly what I expected. He cut her off. The perfect hunter, completing her contract. Then why are you here? Kane's expression hardened. To finish what you started. Drazen is planning something bigger than either of us suspected. A coordinated strike against both Earth and Aelorian territories, using weapons technology stolen from both our worlds. Despite everything, she felt a surge of pride at his resourcefulness. You've been gathering intelligence, while dodging assassins, both yours and his. Not mine, she said quietly. I haven't hunted you. A bitter smile. No. Then what would you call this pursuit across 12 systems? Atonement. The word hung between them, raw and unexpected. Kane studied her, conflict evident in his stance. Prove it. Thalassa slowly reached for her bow, noting how he tensed but didn't raise his own. She knocked her most advanced arrow, the masterpiece of her arsenal, capable of adjusting its trajectory continuously until impact. I could fire this before you could draw, she said. I know. She raised the bow, aimed directly at his heart. This arrow never misses. Neither does mine. He finally raised his weapon, a cruder but effective approximation of her own technology. They stood locked in perfect stalemate, two predators poised at the moment of kill. Thalassa released first. In the split second between release and impact, she did what she had never done in centuries of hunting. She mentally commanded the arrow to miss, redirecting its perfect trajectory to pass harmlessly beside Kane's shoulder. His eyes widened in shock as he loosed his own arrow, which stopped, vibrating, a millimeter from her chest, before dropping to the ground, a fail-safe he had built in, despite everything. You missed, he said, disbelief evident. You never miss. I chose to, she replied simply. Some contracts aren't worth the cost. The space between them seemed to contract as Kane crossed it in long strides. His hand reached up to touch her face, hesitant at first, then with certainty. I modified your tracking arrow design, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Added a biometric lock keyed to your heartbeat. It can find you anywhere in the galaxy now. And, she prompted, her own hand coming up to cover his. And it refuses to harm you. The admission seemed torn from him, even when I commanded it to. Their kiss was not gentle. It carried the weight of betrayal, pursuit, and forgiveness. When they separated, Thalassa rested her forehead against his. Drazen expects me to bring him your body tomorrow, she murmured. Kane's smile was slow and dangerous. Then let's give him what he wants, with a slight modification to the plan. 26 hours later, Governor Drazen's compound burned against the night sky, evidence of his conspiracies broadcasting across all galactic channels. The governor himself was found pinned to his office wall by matching arrows, neither fatal, but precisely placed to form a warning that would be remembered for generations.